Why did Melissa Gilbert stay silent all these years about Dean Butler? And why is she finally speaking now? Because of what she just revealed, no one saw it coming. Not her longtime fans, and definitely not those who believed in the perfect love story of Laura and Almanzo. Was Dean the love of her life? Was their chemistry real? Or was it all for a show? And what has Melissa been holding back for decades? Stay to the end. Because once you hear what she finally revealed, you may never see that iconic TV romance the same way again. The show and the romance everyone believed if you grew up watching Little House on the Prairie. You most definitely know Melissa Gilbert. Most people remember her for her on-screen romantic relationship with Dean Butler. And yeah, let's be honest, that role alone was enough to make her unforgettable. People couldn't stop talking about how good the show was. Little House on the Prairie was about the Ingalls family, who lived in a small wooden house way out in the countryside. They didn't have much money, but they had each other, and that made them rich in a different way. However, life wasn't always easy for them. Sometimes there were storms, sickness, or tough winters, but they never gave up. They helped each other, cared for their neighbors, and always tried to do what was right. At the center of the story was Laura Ingalls, a little girl with a big heart and a lot of curiosity. She didn't have fancy toys or a phone, but she had adventure, love, and family, and that made her story special. People loved the show because it reminded them of what matters, like family, kindness, and never giving up, even when life gets hard. Laura was played by the young actress Melissa Gilbert. She was just about 10 years old at the time she started playing the role. And the truth is, people who watched her grow up on screen felt like they knew her. Every week, they saw her laugh, cry, and learn lessons about life. As she grew older, the show let her character grow too. Laura started going to school and helping around the house, and eventually fell in love. Now here's where things started to get interesting. Actor Dean Butler came into the series as Almanzo Wilder. He was the one Laura fell in love with. The moment Dean showed up on the screen, fans noticed something right away. He had this calm, kind, and strong charisma about him, like someone you could trust. And when Laura met Almanzo for the first time, it was like you could feel the moment her heart skipped a beat. That's how real their connection looked. People didn't just watch Laura and Almanzo fall in love. They believed it. Their chemistry felt so natural, so real, that fans started asking if they were really in love off-screen too. The wedding scenes and the way he looked at her felt so real, and you could have sworn it was more than acting. Everyone believed something was going on behind the camera. Coupled with the fact that those periods were when celebrities weren't big on social media. They hardly shared anything online. There were no Instagram stories or behind-the-scenes clips to satisfy our curiosity. There were just episodes and a few interviews in magazines. That mystery made everything even more magical. People hoped Melissa and Dean were secretly dating. Meanwhile, Melissa and Dean never really talked about their connection during the show. For years, they stayed quiet. They didn't confirm or deny anything. It was like they left it all up to our imagination. And guess what? It worked because fans' imaginations ran beyond Wild. Behind the sweet romance scenes, no one knows what is going on. Were they close friends? Did they have feelings for each other? Or was it all just really good acting? Fans are left to wonder for decades. Still, the love story of Laura and Almanzo became one of the biggest parts of the show. It gave the series heart. It gave fans hope. And it made Melissa Gilbert and Dean Butler household names. People tuned in not just to watch Prairie Life, but to watch that romance bloom. But sometimes, what we see on TV isn't exactly how things were in real life. And as time passed, the questions never stopped. What was going on between Melissa and Dean behind the scenes? Why didn't they ever open up about it? And most of all, what was the truth? Well, after years of silence, Melissa's finally ready to speak. But before we dive into the truth about her and Dean, we need to go back. Because Melissa Gilbert's journey didn't start on the prairie. Her life before Little House on the Prairie was full of twists and turns. She didn't grow up on a farm, and she didn't come from a simple life like Laura Ingalls. Her story is completely different. Her road to becoming a TV star started much earlier, and it wasn't always easy. So now, let's step away from the prairie fields and take a look at the little girl behind the famous braids and sunbonnet that we fell in love with because understanding her shed a whole new light on her relationship with Dean Butler. From ordinary girl to prairie star before Melissa Gilbert became a household name, or the girl with the famous braids, she was just a little girl born May 8, 1964, in Los Angeles, California. She was adopted by actor and comedian Paul Gilbert and his wife Barbara Crane, a dancer and actress, just a day after she was born. From that moment on, Melissa became part of showbiz family, but things weren't always smooth. Even though she had loving parents, her early childhood was filled with pressure and confusion, especially when it came to understanding her place in a family of performers. Paul Gilbert, her adoptive father, was warm and funny. He often took Melissa with him to auditions and shows. She saw cameras, lights, and actors from a very young age. This made the world of television feel normal to her, like it was just part of everyday life. And even though she didn't fully understand it yet, she was already on her path to fame. By the time she was 7, she was already doing commercials. Her natural charm made her stand out. She wasn't a loud or flashy kid. She was just real. Casting agents loved her expressive eyes and her ability to deliver lines without trying too hard. It wasn't long before she landed her first television gigs. She did a few commercials and small roles, just enough to get noticed. Then at the age of 9, Melissa went to an audition that changed her life forever. She auditioned for the role of Laura Ingalls, the brave and curious girl from Little House on the Prairie. The producers were looking for someone special, not just someone who could act, but someone who could carry the heart of the show. What sealed the deal was her screen test with the show's star and producer, Michael Landon. Michael wasn't just a leading man on the show. He played Charles Ingalls, Laura's kind and hard-working father. But off-screen, he was even more important to Melissa. From the very first day they met, Michael became a father figure to her. He saw something in her that others didn't. He guided her, protected her, and treated her like family. Melissa later said that Michael filled a role of father in her life, especially after her adoptive parents divorced and her relationship with her real father became distant. However, their bond didn't stop when the cameras turned off. Michael welcomed Melissa into his real family. She spent time with his children, especially his daughter Leslie. They had sleepovers, shared secrets, and became like sisters. To Melissa, the Landon household was a second home, a place where she felt loved and accepted. And for a young girl in Hollywood, that meant everything. Melissa's real life wasn't always easy. Her parents' marriage eventually ended, and she struggled with the feeling of being caught between two worlds, the glamorous life of a child star and the quiet, confusing emotions of a little girl trying to understand her identity. But Michael was always there. When she needed advice, when she felt lost, when she was unsure about her future, he was just a phone call away. That kind of relationship left a lasting mark on Melissa. Even years later, she describes Michael as one of the most important men in her life. His belief in her gave her the strength to believe in herself. That set became her second home. She had strong friendships with her co-stars, like Allison Arngrim, who played Nellie Olson, and shared years of laughter and learning with them. These bonds helped her grow, both as an actress and as a person. By the time she was in her teens, Melissa had already spent years on Little House on the Prairie. She had filmed emotional scenes, handled tough subjects, and carried the show through major storylines. She had learned how to manage fame, how to take criticism, and how to keep her feet on the ground. But the biggest change came when the show introduced a new character, Almanzo Wilder. Melissa was growing up, and so was Laura. It was time for her character to experience first love, and with that came the arrival of Dean Butler. As Dean stepped onto the set, everything shifted. Their characters, Laura and Almanzo, became the show's most beloved couple. The chemistry was obvious, and fans couldn't help but fall in love with their story. But behind the scenes, Melissa would still try to figure out what it meant to act out a romance, and what it meant when people started wondering if the romance was real. What did Melissa know about love at that age? Was she acting or feeling something real? And how did pretending to fall in love change her forever? The struggles behind the romantic scenes. The world saw a sweet, brave, wide-eyed girl with two braids running across open fields in slow motion. But in reality, Melissa was just a young girl growing up in front of millions, and it wasn't always easy. At first, it was fun, as she was only 9 when she first stepped into Laura's shoes. Everything felt like a dream. She got to wear fun costumes, ride horses, and play on a set that looked like another time. However, as the seasons passed and Melissa got older, something inside her began to shift. The role that once felt magical started to feel heavy. While other children were going to school and hanging out with friends after class, Melissa spent long days on set. She had to memorize pages of lines, follow directions from adults, and give emotional performances again and again. It might have looked fun on TV, but the reality was that being a child actor came with a lot of pressure. What made it even harder was that Melissa had to be perfect all the time, at least in the eyes of the public. People saw her as Laura. Strangers would come up to her and expect her to act just like the sweet girl from the show. But she wasn't Laura. She was just a regular girl trying to grow up. And somehow this reality began to confuse her. As she moved into her teenage years, Melissa started asking herself questions like, who am I? Where does Laura end? And where do I begin? It was tough. Everyone around her was treating her like she was a character, not the person behind the braids and bonnet. It was hard growing up in the spotlight. And it was even harder trying to figure out who she was when the whole world thought they already knew. It didn't stop there. When Dean was introduced as a new character into the show to be her love interest, and later became her husband, it was very awkward and deeply uncomfortable for her behind the scenes. She was still a teenager. She hadn't even had a real-life boyfriend yet, and now she was expected to show romantic affection on screen. She later admitted that filming those scenes with Dean was stressful and strange. However, Dean was professional and kind. But that didn't make it easier for a 15-year-old girl just beginning to figure out her feelings. The pressure didn't stop there. The fans became impossible with their endless questions of whether they were together in real life. For Melissa, acting out that romance felt like stepping into someone else's life. She wanted to make it work. She wanted to make the fans happy. But inside, she sometimes felt lost. She was learning how to play a woman in love, while she was still just a girl figuring out what love even meant. And this role came with more than emotional confusion. There were expectations. She had to smile and look pretty in every scene. She also needed to convince millions of viewers that this grown-up love story made sense, even if she wasn't quite ready. So while everyone cheered for Laura and Almanzo's romance, Melissa was dealing with her private world, a world full of pressure, confusion, and a search for identity. In addition, Melissa had a hard time with something called misophonia while working on Little House on the Prairie. This means small sounds like chewing or tapping really upset her and made her feel angry or uncomfortable, even if no one else noticed them. At the time, the condition wasn't medically diagnosed, so she didn't have a name for what she was feeling. Later, she talked about her experience in an interview with People magazine. What happened when the cameras turned off? What did Melissa go through when no one was watching? Melissa struggled with Hollywood's beauty standard. Melissa landed a lead role in the 1981 remake of Splendor in the Grass, and everything seemed like a new, exciting step in her acting career. But this role came with strings that pulled at her confidence and self-worth. The producers and wardrobe team had very strict ideas about how she should look on screen. Gone was the simple, wholesome look of Laura Ingalls. Instead, Melissa was expected to transform into a glamorous, sexy young woman, one who perfectly fit the Hollywood beauty mold. She recalls how the wardrobe choices felt strange and uncomfortable at first. The clothes were tight and revealing, very different from the modest prairie dresses she was used to wearing in Little House. Every detail mattered, from the length of her skirts to the cut of her tops and the way her hair was styled. The studio wanted Melissa to look like the perfect Hollywood starlet, someone who could captivate audiences with not just acting, but with her looks. This sudden focus on her appearance wasn't just about costumes. The public and media quickly noticed her new style, and Melissa found herself under a microscope. Fans and critics started commenting on her body, face, and new look. It wasn't always kind. Some people judged her harshly for changing from the girl they had loved on TV. The pressure to keep up that glamorous image only grew heavier. At just 18 years old, facing these expectations, Melissa made a decision that many young actresses in Hollywood find themselves making. She chose to have plastic surgery. She underwent a nose job shortly after her 18th birthday. In her own words from her memoir Prairie Tale, she described the surgery as not a big deal, but the reality was much harder. After the procedure, she experienced intense pain and discomfort. She wrote, "I came out of the procedure with my face hurting like hell. They packed my nose with large strips of gauze soaked in liquid substances to help with the pain. The surgery was only the beginning of a tough recovery process. Complications meant she had to undergo 2 more surgeries to fix issues caused by the first one. It was a painful journey, both physically and emotionally. But that wasn't the only change Melissa made. As the years went on, she also decided to get breast implants. The Hollywood industry's beauty standards loomed large, and Melissa felt caught between wanting to feel confident and the pressure to look a certain way. It wasn't just about vanity. It was about survival in an industry that often judges women first by their looks. However, after years of carrying out these changes, Melissa made a bold and honest decision. In 2015, she had her breast implants removed and stopped dyeing her hair red. Speaking to People magazine, she called this choice one of the smartest things I've ever done. For her, removing the implants was about reclaiming control over her own body and health. It was a turning point, moving away from trying to fit Hollywood's mold and embracing her true self. She has become vocal about the unrealistic beauty standards placed on women in the entertainment world. In a heartfelt interview with Prevention magazine, she expressed frustration with phrases like anti-aging, saying, "There's no such thing. It's derogatory and demeaning. Aging is a privilege, not a problem." She added, "I'm aging gratefully. I want to see every line, every mark. It's part of who I am." This new perspective shows how far Melissa has come. From a young actress changing her appearance to fit Hollywood's demands, she now champions natural aging and self-acceptance. She encourages others not to chase impossible ideals, but to embrace themselves as they are. Behind Melissa's fresh start, one name still lingers, Dean Butler. What's their story now? What did she finally reveal? Stay with us as we delve deeper. The truth about her relationship with Dean Butler. Melissa has never been one to shy away from the truth. In her memoir Prairie Tale, she spills a tea that fans waited decades to hear. She admits, "I was 15 and he was 23. I looked like a boy. I was built like a boy. I was a little girl. And I had to pretend to fall in love with a grown man." That's not exactly the dreamy TV romance people imagined. She was a teenager, still uncomfortable in her skin, and now being asked to kiss on camera a man nearly a decade older. Let's not forget that their very first kiss was on national television. There was no warm-up, no real-life chemistry, just lights, a camera, and a script that demanded she look smitten. Melissa said in her book that she was terrified, and the kiss felt awkward and weird. She felt like a kid pretending to be a woman, and Dean knew it too. In interviews, he admitted he felt the age difference, and he tried hard to be respectful and professional. But here's the kicker. Melissa revealed that she had a real-life crush on someone else, and it wasn't Dean. At that time, her heart was with Rob Lowe, the teen heartthrob whom she later dated seriously. Dean, on the other hand, was more like a supportive coworker. "We were never romantic," she clarified. "Dean was like a big brother." Still, the scripts didn't care. Week after week, she had to look into Dean's eyes and pretend he was her soulmate, and fans believed every second of it. Behind the scenes, it wasn't hatred or love as we all expected. It was more of respect. Dean was calm, gentle, and always patient. Melissa said he never once crossed a line or made her feel uncomfortable. She appreciated his kindness and how he treated her like a human being, not just a co-star. They were just two people trying to get their job done, and the world got carried away with it. Over time, their on-screen romance became one of the most iconic love stories in television history. Laura and Almanzo had hashtag couple goals before hashtags even existed. Fans wrote letters, begging for more scenes, more kisses, more everything. But in real life, Melissa was still just a teenage girl navigating fame, awkwardness, and the emotional roller coaster of growing up in public. In an interview with CBS, she said, "There was no spark between us. It wasn't like that. And while that might crush some hearts, it also makes what they accomplished on screen even more impressive. That wasn't chemistry, it was pure acting. Dean Butler also shared a side of the story in interviews and in his book Prairie Man. He said, "We had to build a believable romance, and Melissa made it easy. She was focused, talented, and brave. He knew the age gap made things tricky, and he took his role seriously, not just as Almanzo, but as a protector for Melissa. He even admitted that the pressure from a network and fans to make it all look natural was intense. But he and Melissa created magic even if there was no real romance. Even after the show ended, people kept talking about Melissa and Dean. Some thought maybe they were really in love in real life and just trying to hide it. There were lots of rumors. People asked questions in interviews, hoping for a big secret. But Melissa always told the truth. "We were never more than co-stars," she said in an interview with Entertainment Weekly. It was acting, really good acting. Still, their story has a special kind of sweetness. When Melissa turned 50 in 2014, she and Dean came back together for a TV segment. The connection was still there, but it was all about memories this time. They smiled, hugged, and talked about the old days when they were everyone's favorite TV couple. Not because they were really in love, but because they made us feel like they were. In interviews, Melissa has also reflected on how much Dean helped shape that period of her life. She said, "He was a constant during a very confusing time, and I'll always be grateful for that." That's not a steamy love story, but it's something stronger, a real friendship that stood the test of time, awkward scenes, and public speculation. Now that Melissa has finally broken her silence, fans can rest easy knowing the truth. There was no secret romance, no juicy,